And welcome back to part 2 of Top 14 Excel Tips and Shortcuts. If you haven't seen part 1, which covers all these functions over here, you can go in the description below, click on that link and skip part 2, watch part 1, and then come back to watch part 2. However, they're not in any specific order, so you can watch part 2 and watch part 1 afterwards. Also, if you want to skip the introduction, you can fast forward to the minutes and seconds below somewhere down here, and we can go straight to the next function. Anyway, on this video, we're going to cover the last 7 of the top 14 Excel tips and shortcuts that is a continuation from part 1. And we're going to cover the following topics: trim, upper, lower, proper. This is going to be to talk about getting string text and reformatting it to uppercase, lowercase, or in a proper format. So the first letter, it's capitalized and the other ones are not. We're going to talk about paste values, which is very useful. So when you have data in a column, for example, and you want to get rid of the formulas, you can copy and paste values only, and that gets rid of all the formulas. We're going to talk about removing duplicates. That's a very common task, especially with large data files. We're going to talk about text to columns, which is taking data in one column and splitting it across multiple cells based on a specific delimiter, a space, a comma, a semicolon, that sort of thing. Then we're going to talk about concatenating, which is the opposite of text to columns, which is taking data in multiple cells and putting them back together as one cell. And there's a formula for that, or you can also use the ampersand. So we'll talk about that. Then we're going to cover Autofit width and height. This is when the data inside the cells is bigger than the formatting around Excel. So we want to automatically get Excel to expand our columns or our rows to fit the data automatically that's in there. And then the last thing we'll cover is the formula operations order. So this has to do with algebra, and this is how Excel resolves formulas whenever you see a plus, a minus, multiply, divide, parentheses. We're going to talk about the order in which Excel resolves these formulas. All right. So real quick, if you're an accounting professional, accountant, bookkeeper, and you use Excel to clean up data before you go into QuickBooks, these top tips are actually based on a deep course that I teach accounting professionals to clean up data before they import it into an accounting system or before they create accounting related reports. So considering getting into that course, as a paid course, I'll put the link in the description. If you want to access that, you can watch it live when it comes out in a live webinar, or you can watch the recording forever once you purchase it. All right, so let's jump straight to the first one here. We'll be talking about trim, upper, and lower. And let's go to this tab and let me show you kind of how these work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this name here that says Hector Garcia, and this is in proper function. And then I'm going to use the equals upper formula, open parentheses, select that string. So this will be B2, close parentheses, and this is the formula. And then I'll hit enter. And what it will do is it will take the text string and make it all uppercase. Now, as you guessed it, lower will do the exact same thing, but make it all lowercase. So I'll select this text here that's in proper format, and I'll make it into lower, press enter, and then it will make everything lowercase. So as you can see, upper makes it uppercase, lower makes it lowercase. Now, proper is a really nice one, and a lot of people use this one, which is taking text that's maybe all uppercase, all lowercase, or maybe a mixture, and then basically organize it into proper format, which will make the first letter of each word capital and everything else lowercase. Now, what trim does is trim gets rid of any unwanted spaces. So as you can see with this text, there's a couple of unwanted spaces at the beginning of the name. So if I do equals trim and select the cell there, close the parentheses and hit enter, now you're going to see all the unwanted spaces go away. And you can also nest the formulas, so we can do trim and proper at the same time. So I'm going to do equals proper. So equals proper. I'll open the parentheses, and inside proper, I'll do trim, open parentheses, select the cell, close parentheses, two of them. And notice that is the trim formula nested inside of a proper formula. So when I hit enter, it will do both trim it and make it in proper format. So that's lower, upper, proper, and trim that work really, really well. Now there's a really interesting one called exact. And what exact does is it will take two strings and it will deliver true or false whether the two strings are identical. So for example, we have these two that look identical. So I'm going to do equals exact, and I have to select both texts. So I'll select text 1 and then comma text 2. So notice the formula, how I'm selecting both of these, and I'll close parentheses and hit enter, and it will deliver a true. So that looks true. They both look identical. If I take this exact same formula and do the exact and do the next string here, so I'll select this one, comma, and then select the second one, close parentheses, and hit enter. Now this delivers a false. So I can also nest my proper formula inside of the exact formula to see if after I convert it to proper, would it be exact? So how would that work? So that would be exact, open parentheses, then we have the first string, comma, and then the second text will be the proper version of the second one. So we'll do proper, open parentheses, select this text, close parentheses, close parentheses. So the first string will take it at face value. The second one, it will resolve for proper and then check to see if it's exact. So I hit enter and notice that yes, true. So the proper version of this text is exact as the first one. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky, and this is a really important one because this is where trim becomes really effective. So I'm going to copy the formula style and compare these two and hit enter. And now this is delivering a false. Now, wait a second. I'm looking at these two and these look identical. These look identical. How in the world is there a false here? I'll make them bold here, make it a little bit easier to read. These look identical, but let's explore a little bit further. So I'm going to double click on the text and click on the cursor up here. And notice I don't have any extra spaces on the first string. I'm going to click on the second one, double click, come in here, and notice that there is an empty space and you really can't see it. That's kind of the tricky part of Excel. There it is. There's a little tiny space there that you can't see. So you can follow the same logic here, and we'll replace this with a trimmed version of it. So we'll do trim of the second string, close parentheses. So again, we replaced it with a trimmed version of that, which will remove that space at the end. And now perfect, we got true. That's exactly what we were looking for. Next one's going to be paste value. So what we're going to do is we're going to take information that we calculated through a formula, and then we're going to copy and paste it back without the formula. So let's go here to the exercise. And let's say, for example, that I have all these transactions here that are represented in euros. And I want to convert them to USD with a formula. And I also want to make them go from a negative amount to a positive amount. So I'm going to do multiple things here. So I'm going to do equals. Take this number, multiply it times negative 1.3. Let's assume that's the conversion rate. So I'll press enter, and that would be the USD equivalent in positive amount. So I'm going to change the formatting of this column to be dollars, and there we go. Now remember that these are formula based. So if I were to copy this down here, I'll have all the formulas automatically auto-populate. But if I ever come back and delete this column, my formulas break. So the idea behind copy paste special is so that we can take this information and copy and paste it back in here, and I'll be able to delete the source information because it will no longer be formula dependent. So the way we do that is we select the whole column, for example, and we can hit Control C on the keyboard or right click copy, and then we can click right click and then go to where it says paste special, or we can do Control Alt V. So Control Alt V is the equivalent of clicking on right click and paste special. So the next screen is a paste special screen, which gives me tons of options. Right now we're just going to be focused on values. So I can either click on the values radio button there, or I can just hit V on the keyboard and I'll automatically go to values. And at that point I would hit click OK or hit enter. So the quick formula to that is Control C, Control Alt V, V, enter. That would be the complete sequence. Once we do that, these are no longer formula based. So I can actually take the whole column here, C, that contains the original information, right click and then click on delete, and then my formulas no longer will be broken. So let's move on to tip number 10, remove duplicates. So let's go into the tab here where we have this data set. So in this data set, I have multiple vendor names that I downloaded from a credit card. And what I want to do is I want to delete any vendor names that are duplicate. There's a couple of ways to do this. One, I can select the entire data set and then click on filter. And then I can sort this by description or by name. And then I can visually identify all of these that are duplicated. Now, so if you don't know the shortcuts, you would select the extra ones, right click on delete. That would probably be the way you would do it. Real quick, before we actually remove the duplicates, I want to show you something really interesting, which is we can take this data set here in the Home tab. We can go to conditional formatting, and on conditional formatting, we can click highlight cell rules and then duplicate values. And what this will do is we'll basically mark all the ones that are duplicate so you can see which entries are unique and which ones are not. So it's just a sort of a quick way to be able to mark them. I can select this data set up here and then conditional formatting and clear that if I don't want to see that anymore. So let me go back and sort this back to where it was and then show you how we actually remove the duplicates. So what we do is we select the entire data set that we want to remove the duplicates for. It's important that although we're only removing the duplicates for column B, that we select both A and B, because I also want to get rid of the entire row when I do delete that duplicate. So once I select the two rows that I want to remove duplicates for, I'm going to go into data, and in data tools, there's going to be an icon that says remove duplicates. So this icon right here is for remove duplicates. We click on that, and then it's going to ask me what column would I like to delete duplicates for. So in this case, I only want to do it for the description column. So I'm going to uncheck entry number because I don't want to check duplicate numbers in there, and then click OK. And then here it says that there were 78 duplicate values. It removed them and it only left 121 unique values. Notice that the number sequence broke a little bit, pretty much because it actually removed those rows. Now, let me undo this real quick and show you how to do this also with a shortcut. So I'll select the two columns and I'll hit Alt A M. It's the exact same thing as clicking on the icon. Select only the column that I want to remove duplicates for, click OK, and we're done. So let's move on to 11. Tip number 11, text to columns. So let's say, for example, I have this data set here, which contains my full name of the customer, address, city, state, and zip code, but they're all separated by a specific character. So in this case, every one of these is separated by a hyphen. So I can use text to columns to identify the hyphen as a separator of the data and tell Excel to take the data from one column and create multiple columns separating each of the components of this data set. So I'm going to go ahead and select my entire data here, and I'm going to go into data, text to columns. I can also click on Alt A E and it'll open up the screen. So either I click on the text to columns icon or do Alt A E to get here. So there's two types of text to columns. One is the limited width and the other one is fixed width. So in this particular case, it's not a fixed width because every one of these names have a different number of characters. So this is going to be a delimited, which means there's a specific character separating it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on delimited and then click on next. It gives me a couple of options. Is my delimiting character a tab, a semicolon, a colon, a comma, a space, or other? In this case, is none of this first four. So here under other, I'll just type a hyphen. And then notice here on the bottom how all the data gets separated and split up evenly and cleanly. At this point, I don't have to do anything else. I can click on finish, and then you will notice that my data will be now cleaned up into separate columns. It's a kind of a beautiful thing. Now there's a different application to this, which is fixed width. So for example, let's say I got all these phone numbers that do not have the correct formatting. So I want to separate these into the first three, then the next three, and then the next four. So Alt E, and then I'm going to click on fixed width, and then I click on next. Then here, I'm actually going to have to draw the line. So I get to just click on the right between the two numbers, and it will draw a line, creating the fixed width separation. Then I go to the next one, click in there, and then I drew my 2 lines, basically vertical lines, and it splits the data evenly like this. At that point, I click on finish, and you will notice how my data is split up. So I got my area code, first 3 digits of the phone number, then the next 4 digits. All right, let's move on to tip number 12 here, concatenate and ampersand. In many ways, concatenate is sort of the opposite of text to columns. So what I want to do is I want to take data that's already in separate cells or in separate columns, and I want to join them together and put it just in one cell. So let's say I wanted to do the reverse, which is take this entire address and put it into this cell. So we're going to do it in a couple of ways. So I'm going to start with doing concatenate. So we're going to type concat, and depending on which version of Excel you have, hopefully you have the latest version, concat without the E-N-A-T-E at the end replaced the old concatenate. Now, the long concatenate version is still there, but I'm going to start encouraging you to use the new one, the concat. So we're going to do concat, and then we're going to select either each cell. So we cell number 1, comma, cell number 2, comma, cell number 3, comma, cell number 4, comma, and cell number 5. And I'll hit enter, and it will join all the data together into one cell. Now, the different variation of concat would be selecting the entire array. So we'll do concat, and instead of selecting each one with a comma, we'll select the entire row in this case, the actual array, so A2 to E2 in this case. Close the parentheses, hit enter, and notice it works just the same. So that's how concat works. Now I can also insert in the concat formula any spaces or characters I want to manually. So let's try that. So let's do concat, open the parentheses, select the first cell here, and then I'll do comma, and then I'm going to put quotes, because quotes tells Excel that I'm adding text. I'm going to do quote, and I'm going to add a, let's say, space, slash, space, close quote, then comma, then the next cell, and then I'll just keep repeating, comma. Let me just copy that over. Okay, comma, then the next one, and then copy paste that, comma, the next one, copy paste that, comma, the next one. So notice in the formulation, I'm basically selecting the cell, adding in quotes, space, slash, space, the next cell, and I'm just repeating the process. Close the parentheses, and I'll hit enter, and notice that the concatenation happens, but it adds a slash, a space and a slash between each of those. So that's concat's actually really great to be used in that combination. Now, you could also skip formula and just use the ampersand. So let me show you. So I'm going to do equals, select the first cell, and then put the ampersand, which is shift 7. And then I can, at this point, do quote, space, quote. You will notice I'm not putting any commas here. So I'm putting the cell, ampersand, which is shift 7, then in quotes, whatever space I want to put in between, and that would be optional, of course. Then I'm going to do the ampersand, and then select the next cell here. Okay, and then I will do ampersand again, quote, space, quote. Again, quote, space, quote is just me inserting spaces between the text that I want to join together. I don't have to do that. If I want them all together without any spaces, I can do that. So I'll just do this first 3, hit enter, and then show you. Notice that the name, address, and city all came in with spaces in between. So you have different versions of the concatenate formula and the ampersand. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and show you a similar process here using these phone numbers that we separated. I'm going to show you maybe more of a real world type of scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and click on equals and type text join. That's a new formula. So text join allows me in the syntax to put one delimiter that's going to go across all of the text that I'm putting together. So I'll do quote hyphen quote, and then I'll do comma, and then here where it says ignore entries cells, I'm just going to type true. Okay, I don't have any empty cells in this case, but if I had some, it might be useful to do that. And then I'm going to do on the next cells, I can select the entire array like this. So notice that I did text join instead of concat. I did the delimiter first, which is a hyphen. I told it to skip any empty cells, and then I selected the array afterwards. So I'm going to hit enter, and notice what happens. Our phone numbers get cleaned up, so I can click and drag this down, and this will look perfect. Now let's talk about that skipping empty spaces for a second. I'm going to go ahead and insert a space here. So I'm going to basically an empty cell. So I'm going to click on insert, and then I'm going to shift this to the right, and then I'm going to change the formula, and instead of putting true here, so instead of putting true, I'm going to put false. Okay, so I'm going to say don't skip empty cells, or in other words, include empty cells. So notice what will happen once I hit enter. Notice it will do a double hyphen there, right? Because it looked at the empty cell and it took that into consideration as well. So that true false inside the text join is just really, really valuable for it to skip the empty cell, which in this case, we had an empty cell when we selected the entire text array. Tip number 13 is Autofit width and height. So let's go into the tab over here. And sometimes what happens is we'll download a data set, or somebody will give us a data set, and it feels like the columns and the rows are basically fixed size and they're not adjusted to fit the actual table. So there's a couple ways to fix this. Is one, you can move the cursor over to in between any of the two rows or two columns you want to expand, and then you can click and drag to the right, and you can make it as big or as small as you want to. The other option to that is to double click actually between the two. So if I wanted to expand B and C, I would just double click between the two once my cursor looks like a cross here, and I will automatically select the two, and would actually make B in this case automatic size to fit all the data in the cell. So I can do the same thing under C, same thing under D, same thing under E. All right, let me just pull this back and put it back to where it was. Another way of doing this is to select all the columns in this case, and then once they're selected, you double click between any of the two and it'll automatically size all of them. The same thing goes with the rows. If I go to my rows and I double click between any of the two rows after I've selected them, and they will automatically resize. Same thing with the columns as we just showed you. Let me undo, and show you a shortcut for this. So let's say, for example, I select the entire data set. So I just click literally left to the A and on top of the 1, that's a select all button. And then I click on Alt HOI and Alt HOA. So that would actually automatically make the width and the columns automatic size to fit the data in the columns and the rows. The last trick, number 14, is the way that Excel resolves formulas when there's multiple operators or multiple nested formulas, multiple calculations inside of a single cell or a single long formula. So this is PEMDAS, PEMDAS, or some people remember it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Anyway, the P stands for parentheses. So parentheses get resolved first. Anything inside a parentheses gets resolved first. The next one would be exponents. So anything with a root, a square root, or a power of any sort, that will be resolved next. Then we're going to see multiplication or division. So as long as it's either or, they will be resolved in order of left to right in this particular case. And then addition and subtraction, they both get resolved in the order of left to right. So when you know that order, you will know that putting parentheses in a formula significantly changes the end result. So let's take a look at this formula that we see here. So we see 3 plus 7 divided by 2 minus 4 multiplied times 5. So if you were to calculate that on your own, if you weren't following PEMDAS and you were using some other quirky way of calculating, you're going to get a different result. But let's type it in Excel and see what happens. So 3 plus 7 divided by 2 minus 4 times 5. Okay, so we got 3 plus 7 divided by 2 minus 4 times 5. And before I hit enter, let's just keep something clear. 7 divided by 2 will be resolved first. So this is going to render 3.5. Then it's going to resolve 4 times 5, which is going to give me a 20. So at this point, I'm adding 3 plus 3.5, which will give me 6.5 minus 20 should give me, enter, negative 13.5. So it's one of those things that's just really, really interesting. If you're not paying attention to how Excel does this automatically, you will get maybe an undesired result. Let me copy and paste this formula here in the bottom, and let's modify it slightly. So let's say, for example, I decided to make some changes here. I decided that 3 plus 7 will be by itself. And so I'm going to close parentheses on 3 plus 7, which is going to give me a 10. And then I'm going to divide the whole thing by the solution of 2 minus 4 times 5. But I'll make it one step further. I'm going to separate 4 times 5. So in this case, I'll be 2 minus 4, which will render negative 2. So negative 2 times 5 will give me 10. So at this point, this will give me 10 divided by 10. Let me just add one more parenthesis here to make sure that that's right. So what I've done here is I said, okay, take this whole parenthesis and resolve that first, which will start with 2 minus 4, which will give me negative 2. And then I have times 5. So negative 2 times 5 in this gray parentheses, that's going to give me 10. So if I'll take 10 divided by 10, I should be negative 1 in this case. So I hit enter, and there it is, negative 1. So that PEMDAS is a really, really good reminder that you can seemingly have the same numbers and a whole bunch of operators and formulas. And if you don't know how Excel is solving for each one, you might get a result that you weren't expecting. The last tip I'll give you, let's call it tip number 15, is practice. Practice, 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 practice. You can watch videos on YouTube. You can watch tutorials, read tutorials, but until you're practicing and doing this every day, you're not going to get good at it. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't have data to practice with. I don't have a job, whatever. Go to data.gov, deta.gov, and you can click on data, and you can download all sorts of databases collected by the US government about the United States. Might be meaningless to you, but it'll be a big Excel files with tons of data. You can play with it. There's tons of demographic data, agriculture data, climate data, economic data. All those stuff could be really, really valuable. It's real life data that you can use to play with. On the last note, if you're an accounting professional, accountant, bookkeeper, and you want to learn Excel from me and how I use it every day for my own accounting projects. So cleaning up data that comes from the bank, cleaning up messy accounting information, organizing data so I can import it into an accounting system like QuickBooks or something like that, or creating financial reports with financial data that we cleaned up in Excel. Take my course, hectorgarcia.com/advanced Excel. Go to that URL, and it'll cost you $100, and you're going to have a whole bunch of videos that I created just for my colleagues, accountants and bookkeepers, that want to learn practical advanced Excel skills for cleaning up accounting data. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hit like, subscribe, add some comments below, ask me any questions. What else should I do when it pertains to Excel? Thank you for watching. Share with your friends. Goodbye.